Gustav Mahler is known for a few things. As a conductor, he would demand so much from his orchestras. As a composer, he wrote extensive directions for conductors in his scores. As a father, he lost his eldest daughter, and as a man, he was very expressive, displaying complexities all around. His final work, Symphony No. 9, is exemplary of that. Written in the summer of 1909, 2 years before his death, it's considered a farewell to life, to love, and to music as Mahler's known it thus far. A symphony in 4 movements. Each movement represents a different scene. A slow first movement, a dance of the dead, a rondo burlesque, and an adagio adagissimo last movement. This symphony was considered a farewell by critics and musicologists at the time of its performance. After Mahler's death in 1911, a farewell narrative was created to personify the piece. Mayru's Shire talked about the, quote, resigned farewell of an unsteady person who finally went to his rest, end quote. Paul Stefan refers to the Adagio as Mahler's swan song. Quote, it brings absolute and overwhelming peace, a distinct farewell, which bears a remarkable resemblance to the last songs of Das Lied von der Erde, end quote. But although mostly associated with a farewell to life, the piece was also considered a farewell to the Romantic style. Bernd Sponheuer says, quote, in spite of the underlying mood of farewell and mourning, the work displays magnificent constructive tectonic strength, which justifies referring to it as the first example of the new music, end quote. To display an underlying mood of farewell and mourning, but show strength, would seem almost contradictory, but is rather a demonstration of complex emotions in the piece. In this essay, I will explore the evocation of these complex emotions in specific moments of the last movement. I will also show how these emotions are invoked in the listener through performance by way of the conductor, as Mahler would have considered the role of the conductor in bringing the piece to life. Michael Spitzer claims that complex emotions can be a mixture of basic ones. Basic emotions include happiness, fear, anger, tenderness, and sadness, and these induce direct physical symptoms. Think of smiling while you're happy, crying while you're sad, or frowning while you're angry. Complex emotions are presented in at least one of 3 forms: derivatives, hybrids, and mixtures of basic emotions. Derivatives diverge from or expand basic emotions. Hybrids are a compound or blend of 2 or more emotions occurring at once. Mixtures are the synthesis of different basic emotions. Complex emotions include jealousy, envy, hope, nostalgia, pride, shame, wonder, sublime, disgust, and boredom. When talking about how complex emotions come to be, Spitzer says, quote, non-basic emotions can be viewed as the product of interaction between basic emotions and cognitive states such as thoughts and beliefs. Here is my analysis of the 4th movement, an adagio finale in 3 parts. It is based on 2 themes, one in D-flat major and the other in the parallel minor to show contrast within the same tonic. The first theme in D-flat major is initially presented by the violins and other strings as a descending 5th, followed by a leap and descending 3rd. Right before and during this, there is a turn figure motive that recurs throughout the movement. The second theme in D-flat minor, at times spelled as C-sharp minor, is initially presented in the bassoon as an ascending 5th, followed by a descending arpeggio, then ascending more than a 5th. Later, the theme shows up in other low voices, such as the cello, then moves about the orchestra. The movement evokes sadness through its slow and unvaried tempo, low register and instrumentation, low dynamics, static harmony, as demonstrated in my analysis, and smooth articulations in both themes. But this emotion is expanded to sadness's derivative, grief, with higher activation through a more disjunct melodic line, accented attacks, and wide dynamic changes between the themes and in different iterations of the themes. A sense of nostalgia is also present throughout the movement. Quote, the fourth movement foregrounds evocative, nostalgic, epilogic, reflective themes through variations of a quasi-ostinato bass chorale and a lonely monophonic tune treated in dissonant counterpoint. End quote. This is also demonstrated through Mahler's harmonic coloring and often use of the flat 2 and flat 4 chords to allude to other unrelated major key areas, as well as the recurrence and later transformations of the turn figure presented by the violins in the first measure of the movement. I discussed the opening measures of the movement, its musical characteristics, and the emotions evoked there. Here's a clip of Leonard Bernstein conducting these measures with the Vienna Philharmonic. At the onset of sound, Bernstein is physically trembling, encouraging the musicians to play with a big sound, but also show pain in the line. His eyes are closed in this whole section, with his head down most of the time, a more plaintive, thoughtful posture. He gives clear emphasis to accents in the lines, both with downward motion of the arms, but also by furrowing his eyebrows. This creates tension in the face and body, demonstrating pain in the line and relief in its resolution. Here is the developmental retransition before the climax of the movement, or measures 114 to 125. Mahler here has the orchestra at a fortissimo dynamic. He increases the tension and creates excitement by having opposing rhythms atop of each other, syncopation in the upper woodwinds against the turn figure motive at different metric levels, quintuplet eighth notes in lower woodwinds and strings, and quintuplet 16th notes in the second violins. There is a high level of activation in this section through the sforzando accents, wide range of dynamics with crescendos and decrescendo in timpani, the rapid succession of the turn figure motive throughout the orchestra, chromaticism, and finally the timbral change that comes with the introduction of the trumpets for the first time in this movement at a more flowing tempo. This shocking moment is contrasted with an equally loud flourish in the woodwinds and strings at a pesante tempo. The section closes similar to how the movement begins, with the violins wailing through a sustained descending line. All of this successfully evokes a mixture of emotions: surprise, anger, grief, and passion, while at the same time evoking a hybrid of sublime and nostalgia at the section's resolution. Here's a clip of Daniel Barenboim conducting Staatskapelle Berlin through this section. Although not shown at first, Barenboim is showing large but non-invasive flowing gestures, letting the rhythmic writing speak while staying out of the way. The high activation occurs in his conducting when the brass enter at their fortissimo dynamic. Barenboim stretches time at the pesante, allowing each note to be accented, and really slows down into the wailing violins, almost suspended in time before the resolution. He also trembles at this point in the piece, encouraging the violins to sustain and play each note with force, and reminiscing on the same line from the start of the movement. Here is the second half of the coda of the movement, the closing Adagissimo. Gregory Spears says in his dissertation, quote, "The coda could be understood as both a meditation on loss and remembrance," end quote. Starting at measure 171, this is the true moment of stasis in the entire movement. Just as the movement began, the instrumentation is just strings, but muted and initiating sound separately, especially in the last system. The dynamics stay in the range of pianissimo and quadruple piano, very, very, very soft, with an added direction of esterbent, meaning dying, at the end. Each section is playing in their instrument's comfortable range, moving slower with each phrase. Every note, interval, and harmony is heard. The moving notes in the second violins and violas are the turn figure motive that we've heard throughout the movement, in its original form and inverted. This section evokes a mixture of fear and acceptance while creating a hybrid of emotions with nostalgia. The thinness of the strings gives this section an eerie feel, but the intermittent return of the turn figure motive seems to assure that things are happening as they should. Turn figure is both a memory and a look to the present. Here's a clip of Claudio Abbado conducting the Lucerne Festival Orchestra through this section. Although his posture is upright, Abbado shows a tenderness and care for every note. His gesture is small and smooth, devoid of any accents that occurred earlier in the movement. His arms move just as slowly through space as the notes and chords do through the string section. Abbado lets the last note dissipate on its own, not showing a clear cutoff. Although not shown in the clip, the best part, he lets the silence engulf the hall, standing on the podium with his eyes closed for about 2 minutes after the last note. All the conductors found ways to invoke the emotion of the music in their bodies and faces. This clearly affects the quality of the playing from the musicians, and in turn affects what the listener and viewer feels. The emotional depth of this movement is highly apparent. Even on the second, third, fourth, and nth listen and view, I was finding different emotions being evoked. One thing does remain. Every time I listen to this movement, especially the coda, I am in awe of the suspense Mahler builds till the very end. What a way to leave his musical imprint on this earth.